Hey guys, so we're doing week 6 now of the App Academy, and you might notice that this is a pre-recorded video instead of the streams we usually do. That's just because the streams are a bit too long and it's a lot to record in one go. So I decided from now on we're just going to record the lessons while I'm doing it, and I can just cut out all the parts that are not important, like when I'm watching this video. Because on a stream, while I'm watching the video, it's basically just a silent stream and a lot of people leave. So yeah. Well, you can see we're already on lesson 5 here. I skipped a bit. That's because the first few lessons was just the guy talking. He didn't actually give us any code to write. I'm just going to show you what I have already here. So I created this folder called week 6 here to get started. And there's these two files, config.js and enter API key, which I downloaded from the videos here. You had it at the bottom here. If you don't have access to IT Varsity and you can't get those files, make sure you're in one of our groups. In the description of this video, there should be a link to our Discord group where you can get the files there. We'll post it. And yeah. After I copied those two files, config.js and enter API key.html, I downloaded them from here and put them in the folder. And then I just created this index.html file here. So inside of this index.html file, there's nothing special. There's just a div with the ID of table and then two buttons here. The first button has an ID of refresh and the second button has an ID of add contact. And it was all basically just from the video here. There's nothing special about this. I just wrote down what he wrote down. And then here at the bottom we put script with the src. And src is how you link to an external script. So the script I linked to is config.js, which is the one we downloaded here. You have to make sure it's in the same folder or it won't be able to link here. And then we closed that script tag. And we opened another set of script tags here at the bottom. And this is where we'll be writing the scripts that he gives us in the videos. So let's continue from there. Okay, so here at the top on the body, we want to do onload. And we set this equal to fetch contacts. Now, you can probably see here that there's no fetch contacts function. Right now he just put this at the top there. He hasn't created the function yet. It's just so that we don't forget to put it in later. Now what this onload does is when the page loads, it will automatically call this function. Okay, so now we're actually going to create the function called fetch contacts, which we're calling up here in the onload. Make sure they're both spelled the same. And inside of it, we're going to do fetch. And fetch is a command that pulls something from the internet. It can be an API or basically anything that's on the internet. But in this case, we're going to be in the config here. There's a URL. And this is for the API that we're going to be using in this video or this week's lessons. So here we want to fetch this variable here called root path. So I'm just going to copy it. And I'm going to paste it in here. And if you're wondering how this can access root path, it's because we're using the script up here. So any public variables we created in this script here, by public I mean we created it outside of a function, so it's accessible from anywhere. We can use these variables in other scripts as well. So we're fetching root path here, and I'm just going to head back to the video to see what he does next. Okay, so we actually want to add something here. We want to concatenate the string. And we want to add on another string here where it says /controller /get -contacts. And another / here. So let me just head back to the website to see if I got that all correctly. Okay, so after this we need to do .then, and there's one thing I want to show you here when you're using .then. We're actually calling .then on this fetch method, so it's the same as if we put it up here. The reason why we put it on its own separate line is because it's going to contain a lot of code inside of it as well. And if we had a huge bunch of code like this and we put it all on one line, it's quickly going to become way too long. So you can also like separate code like this into separate lines. And the way we use .then, I'm not sure if he explained it properly in the lesson, but it takes a function as a parameter. Now there's two ways we can pass a function in here. We can do function, and well, you already know how to create a function by now. The other way is we can just use brackets in here and we can say what it's taking as a parameter. So response, and this keyword response can be anything, it's just what it's taking in as a parameter. And next to these brackets we use the equals to sign and the greater than sign, and then we use our curly brackets here to say what it must do with the response. So this is an alternative way of writing a function, but I'm going to undo this and do it the way he shows in the video. So he creates a function here and it takes a response and then it just returns response.json. Okay, so this is the way he has it. Let's continue now. Okay, so next we need to chain on another .then, and it's basically the same thing here. This whole thing is one fetch statement, and it would work the same if we put it all on one line. We're just separating it onto different lines so that it's easier to read the code here. But just so that everyone understands, this whole thing is just one fetch statement. This .then is running at the end of this fetch statement, and this .then runs after this first one. So it's the same as if we just connected them all up like this. I hope that makes sense. And here we just take another function, and this one we called it data. Again, you can call this whatever you want, it's just that inside of the function you have to use the same name that you put here. So I just opened up that function. If I wanted to use whatever this is getting in, we use it here. We have to use the same name. Now you may wonder where this data is coming from. So this fetch here, it fetches something and brings it back a response. And this .then gets that as a parameter. Now this .then returns something. So it's returning response.json. And whatever it's returning here is what this function will take in as a parameter. So in other words, if this wasn't returning something, we can't take a parameter here. So I hope everyone understands how .then works. I have a full video covering this on my channel, and we also have a project that uses .then and APIs. It's if you head to my channel, it's in the live section. It's called live projects. So I'm just going to continue here. Okay, so inside of the second .then, we put a function that takes data as a parameter, and we're calling a function here called display output. Now he hasn't yet created that function, so I assume he's going to create it next, and we're just passing the data into that. So if I had to assume this display output function is what's going to display that data in this div called table here. So we're going to comment out this line where we run the display output function because it hasn't been created yet and will give us an error. And then we're going to console.log the data. And if I save this and we click go live here, we should see this page here, and I'm going to go to index first, index.html. It's going to redirect us back here, but anyways, let's look at inspect here. Okay, so I filled in my email address there, the email address that I used to sign up to IT Varsity. And now we loaded up the index page, and if we do inspect here and head to the console, we can see an array here. Now I know a lot of you have been getting an error where you can't open up that console. All you have to do is right click and select inspect here, and then you click on console right here. and that will bring up the console. So if I expand this, you can see this is what it fetched from that API. So there's a whole bunch of data there. If you're wondering how this function is run, again, we called it in the body here in onload, and that makes the function run as soon as the page opens up. But because of this config.js script, whenever we first load up this page, it's going to take us to that enter API thing, and we have to type in the email address we used when creating our ITvarsity account. So now we need to create the function called display output, and it takes one parameter called data here. And in this function, we're going to set output equal to a table here. Okay, so after this we need to do for a in data. And I'm just going to quickly explain what a for loop is, but I'm going to skip over all the code he puts in here because you basically just have to copy what he says in the video. It's going to take me a long time if I have to speak every time I type out some code here. So all of this code in here is just stuff you should already know by now. So I'm just going to explain for loops for now. So a for loop is something you use when you have a lot of data that's all stored together, for example, as a list or an object. Now, these lists or objects could contain more than one item inside of it. So let's say this contains 5 items inside of it. When we run a for loop, we create a variable here. So we're using a as our variable, and it's going to run some code that's inside of here the same amount of times as how many elements are inside of data. And each time it runs it, the a is going to be equal to that item in the data. So the first time it runs, a will be equal to whatever the first item in the data is. The second time it runs, a will be equal to the second item in whatever the data is, and so on. So in this example, we have contacts here, that's what it's returning. And let's say we have 3 contacts. Each time this loop runs, it's going to run all the code inside of this block here. And it's going to do that once for each contact in this data. So I hope that makes sense. And now I'm just going to skip through the rest of the code until we get to something that I need to explain again. Okay, so I've just copied out the code that he has there. Now, the one thing you might be confused about here is it looks like there's no quotes here, but if you look really closely, there's a backtick here at the top and the bottom. This is different from a single quote, which looks like this. The backtick button is above tab, so you need to open one of those up here and then close it at the bottom here. Again, that button is above tab on your keyboard. Okay, so now we're done creating the display output function. Basically, we just set the opening tag for the table here, and then we ran the for loop and we added some table data here. And basically for each contact in the data we received, we're going to add a row here, and we're going to put as the first table data is going to be an image. And I just copied this path here that he gave in the video. And then the second table data is an h5 tag with the first name of the user in it. And then the third table data is the same thing but with the last name instead of the first name. And then after the for loop here, I made this mistake of accidentally writing this code inside the for loop. So you want to go outside of this curly bracket here. And then we use this output, we set it equal to the closing table tag. Remember, we have to use plus equals to here so that it doesn't overwrite what's inside of it. And then we do document.getElement by ID table. That's this div here with the table. And since we're doing .innerHTML equals, we're doing equals here. So we're overwriting whatever's inside of it here. So this loading thing here will disappear, and instead we're mounting this output here. And the output is going to be this opening and closing table tag with all of the contacts in between it. So I hope everyone gets that. Let's head to the browser and see what it looks like. So we have a bunch of different contacts here, and then some names and surnames here. Now before I move on, I know a lot of you are saying your images don't load. Make sure you look at this path correctly here in the SRC, because it's a long path, so there's a good chance you spelled something incorrectly. So take a minute, pause the video, and make sure you have this path here correct. Okay, so now we're going to code the refresh button here, and all we need to do is here at the top of the script, we're going to do document.getElementById, and the ID of that button is just refresh. And then we're going to say .add event listener here. And I think we've already covered add event listener before, but the first parameter it takes is what event we're listening for, so click. And the second parameter is what function to fire. So remember, when we hit this refresh button, all we wanted to do is to basically refresh the database. So basically run this command again. So this is what we're going to pass in as the second parameter here. And that's done. When we hit refresh now, it should restart the whole process of running this fetch contacts function. And then the fetch contacts function calls this display output, which will display the new data into our table div here. So let's go test this out. I'm going to refresh here, and then at the bottom of the page I want to hit refresh, and I'm not sure if it's working or not, but it basically refetches that data and puts it in. The reason why we're not seeing a change here is because we have the data already here. Nothing changes since we hit that refresh button. When we hit refresh up here, the reason why we see it load is because, remember, it starts off as contacts loading, and then we fetch the data and put it in. But when we hit the refresh button, the data is already in there. So we're not seeing any change because it's changing from this data into the exact same data. I hope that makes sense to everyone. I know I explained it a bit weirdly there, but there's really no easy way for me to explain that. Imagine if we had a div here, we had some data inside of it, and we overwrote that data, but we put the exact same data back in. You wouldn't be able to notice that anything changed there. I hope everyone gets that. And actually, let me just give you a visual demonstration so that you can understand that it is refreshing when we hit this button. So here where we're doing one click, I'm just going to get rid of this for a second, and I'm going to create my own function here. And in here we're going to do document.getElementById, and the ID we want to get is table, and we want to set the inner HTML to basically anything here, doesn't really matter. I'm just going to do test here, and then on the next line I'm going to call that fetch contacts function. So now if we save this and run it, we hit refresh here, we can actually see that it shows some visual, it shows that it's refreshing here. So the reason why it shows now is because for that few seconds while it's loading in the data, it sets the inner HTML to test. And then after we're done fetching the data, it displays the contacts again. So let's change this back to how it was before. Again, I hope that makes sense to everyone. This is a tricky thing to explain, and yeah, hope everyone understands it. Okay, so with that, I'm going to end this video here because we covered basically everything that you could get confused with, and I'm sure everyone can go on with this week's lesson without any more help. Everything is all set up now. But if you guys do need more help, make sure you leave a comment and I'll follow up this video with the next part. right now my Wi-Fi is bugging as well, so I'm on lesson 9 here and the video is not playing. And yeah, make sure you guys subscribe as well, and I'll see you guys in the next video.